was kind of your inspiration for doing this film, for making this film, and what did you kind of hope was there specific kind of things that you learned in doing this process, in directing this film, in all the places that this film took you? It seems like it was really, really wonderfully spread across the world, across different settings. And what did you kind of hope to get that the film would be able to do in a way?
You know, became involved in this project in like kind of a unique way. I was approached by the producers who were like developing the film. So it wasn't sort of my big inspiration to make a film about microplastics. I, in fact, had to be sort of taught what microplastics were. What did I learn? Basically, everything in that film, you know, is essentially what I learned. And, you know, obviously, when you throw yourself into a subject like this and you kind of go deeper and deeper, and I was trying to make a film, you know, a watchable film, also trying to give it a bit of a kind of global, you know, dynamic. Um, so yeah, so I mean, obviously, this kind of subject has a huge impact on someone who was, you know, like I would have considered myself your average sort of concerned citizen. Um, and obviously, you know, the scale and the consequences of this overproduction are just so enormous that you can't help but be like very affected by it, and you can't help sort of, you can never sort of unsee it. You know, that was the way that I felt. I was hoping to spread the information, and you know, people can sort of take it from there.
When you are in that balance between the seriousness of the problem and that sense of paralysis, there's also a risk of misinformation. How can we, you know, was there any sort of, you know, I don't know, thoughts in the film about, or like in reflecting afterwards, how do we combat the this industry, you know? One of the characters in the film says, "I love capitalism," but you know, it seems like to fight plastic, we have to fight capitalism. Is that, I don't know if you have some thoughts on that.
Plastic and capitalism are very wrapped up together. There's no question about that. And one of the reasons why you see it everywhere and you can't get away from it is because, you know, to put it bluntly, it's just unbelievably profitable. It's, you know, super cheap to make. The overproduction of it is, again, profitable, cheap. You know, it's essentially a byproduct of oil and gas production, right? Which has been completely ramped up. It's like a miracle product, it can do almost anything. You know, it's totally malleable, totally plastic. I always try to like keep in mind, ever like after doing this for a year, single use plastic. That's really the first step, the first thing that needs to be addressed. You know, it's totally diabolical to use this miracle product for 10 seconds and then throw it away for essentially eternity for, you know, intents and all our intents and purposes. So I would start with that whenever I sort of am talking about people and they want to know what they can do or what they should care about. It's not like the plastic in like hospital, you know, like medical devices that we should be worried about. Maybe someday we could get to that. But single-use plastic and packaging and disposable material, disposable products should be like, I would just always keep that in mind. Everything I do, like single use, single use, single use. And you know, in our work, it's very hard. We travel a lot. You know, the first thing that a production assistant does on a film shoot, even on a documentary film shoot, is like get a whole bunch of plastic bottles of water for the guys that are working hard holding booms all day. And we try to like, you know, we've definitely been trying to do less of that, but you just see how it's integrated completely into, you know, life. I don't know if I can exactly answer this. I mean, I think there's a lot of other reasons why people are living longer, but the rates of all those, you know, diseases that we mentioned in the film have all gone up quite a bit. So there is a lot more cancer. They're better at treating it, and all those, you know, conditions that involve inflammation and other things have increased like a lot, a lot, and younger and younger people get it. So that's not my total area of expertise, but I would definitely be worried. All the people who had any kind of expertise about the health effects and the toxicity of plastic that we interviewed in that film, for as intense as it gets sometimes, off camera, almost every single one of them was more concerned than they appeared on camera, because they're all scientists and they all are waiting for like definitive proof before they, speak in a certain way. Yes, I was and am working on something related, but I did actually need to take a little break from it, to be honest. So the next few projects, I'm working on something, that I've just been hired to do after this, but the next few projects that I'm trying to develop are on a different subject. It does sort of, it is a pretty taxing subject, because it's not just all the research you do beforehand, and then all the sort of pre-interviews you do, and then you travel and talk to all those people, and then you spend 6 months in the edit, going over it and kind of relearning it every day. I'm going to take a little break from it, but yeah, someday I will get back to the plastic issue, and recycling in particular. The kind of myth of recycling is something that I think we could have included more in the film. The big lie and the big kind of scandal of recycling probably deserves its own film. Yeah, I mean, the thing about microplastics are you can obviously consume more of them, but they really are everywhere. Like you're breathing them in right now. So I'm sure there is a matter of degrees, but people are looking to make that definitive link between the plastic in our body and like human health. It hasn't been, you know, scientists are always very sort of careful with that kind of thing to like make the like, smoking does cause cancer. It took forever to come to that conclusion, I think. Um, but you can put the pieces together right now. They know it's toxic. They know there's these things that affect people's hormones within that toxicity. There's no doubt about that. And then they know it's in our body. And the things in the film about the finding it in the human brain, there have been more studies like that. We were pretty much the first people to kind of, that was one of the first studies that found that. Um, and we were the first people to kind of put that into some kind of media thing. And then the New York Times did an article about that scene, like just that scene, and it kind of was the first time that that came out. But there have been more since then, and they're finding more and more and more of it. So it won't be long. It won't be long until, and all of the big oil and gas companies are preparing for those lawsuits. That is a fact also. They're preparing for this similar types of lawsuits that came at the tobacco companies, because they know that it's inevitable. And that is another way to fight this for sure. There have been some pretty interesting lawsuits. Like New York State sued PepsiCo for all of the material damages for their products, which sort of end up everywhere, clogging up waterways. And there was something, I think California might have sued Coca-Cola for sort of lying about the recyclable qualities of their products, and sort of similar again to the tobacco companies for like saying, oh, we don't know if it causes cancer or not, when really they did know. So I would look to that when as maybe another kind of way, supporting those kind of things is another way that might be a reasonable solution where things might change. I could imagine a world where there's a lot less single-use plastic. And again, I would like always focus on that. I mean, that seems like a reasonable thing that most human beings could get behind, and a very good first step. You know, there are people that are planning and advocating for a world without any plastic. The woman in the film, Diane, who had that amazing lawsuit against that company Formosa,
Yeah.
she talks about that, like hopeful for a world with no plastic. I think a more realistic goal is finding ways to curb the overproduction and the ridiculous single-use plastic. Um, and also, I mean, we have to keep in mind that things are trending the wrong direction, right? They're just making more and more and more and more and more of it, like a straight line up. Um, so first we have to stop them making too much of it and then
Yeah,
start
that's true.
reducing it, I think. The thing with recycling is it was used as a justification to make more plastic.
Hmm.
That's why it's done more harm than good. And that's part of what these lawsuits will eventually be. They sort of tricked us into thinking in the first backlashes to plastic and especially disposable plastic, like, you know, like back in the 80s, I remember when I was a kid, everyone was up in arms about like styrofoam containers for fast food and things like that,
Hmm.
right? And people were like, we got to ban this, we got to ban this, we got to ban this.
Hmm.
That's when the recycling, you know, messaging sort of kicked in a big major way.
Hmm.
So that, and it was a plan, right? So the big plastic and oil and gas companies could continue to make more plastic. So they said, don't worry about it, we'll recycle it. Um, Continue to use it, we'll continue to make it. And they got better at kind of hiding it, getting it off the streets, putting it in certain places. And they are able to recycle, you know, maybe 10% of it, which is not nothing. So I don't know if it's better to throw it in the garbage. Being buried doesn't help, I don't think, because then it's going to be degrading and getting into the soil.
Hmm.
But don't do the thing that like we were tricked into doing where like, you know, I remember, you know, people didn't know any better. I'm not blaming people and definitely don't want to blame any people, the regular people, for sort of living their lives and believing the information they get. But like, oh, it's okay for me to use this plastic because they'll recycle it and then they'll just make another one.
Hmm.
That's what we have to definitely get out of our, you know,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
way we see things.
Hmm.
Do not think that you can just use something. And like a woman said earlier, even when things do get recycled, they often get downcycled, meaning that it's not like a one-to-one thing. Like the quality of the plastic and what it can do goes down usually when you recycle something. So if you've got a plastic water bottle, the next thing that it becomes when you recycle it is like plastic film, maybe, and then it gets less and less recyclable. And different kinds of plastics are more recyclable, and some communities, like in Montreal, certainly all the things that you throw away in the recycling bins are not recyclable locally, so they just won't be recycled.